Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of AAC in the Cloud. We're excited to have you here with us today. Our presenters for this session will be Jill Senner and Matt Baud. We're grateful to have them for the things they have to share. Their presentation will be about educating school staff to model AAC in the classroom. So a pretty important topic, and we'll turn things over to them.
Hi, I'm Jill Senner, owner and director of Technology and Language Center. We are a tele-AAC pediatric practice.
And I'm Matthew Baud from Niles Township District for Special Education. Today, a link can be found, and we're going to put it also in the Slack, to the handout under the presentation handout section on the free resources page of the Technology and Language Center website.
Yeah, I know it says when you go to our session, it says no handout has been uploaded. This is where the handout is, and I did just pop it in the Slack. So just a little housekeeping. I have some financial and non-financial disclosures. I'm the owner and director of Technology and Language Center, which I mentioned previously, where we conduct workshops and trainings on the SMORES method, and SMORES is a registered trademark of Technology and Language Center.
And my financial disclosures include that I have my own practice where I do provide communication partner instruction and present workshops on what we're talking about today with SMORES, and I have no non-financials to disclose.
Just a quick couple of legal things already mentioned. SMORES is a trademark of Technology and Language Center. And copyright information, although today is not a level training.
And then for today, the expected outcomes are that you guys will be able to list 3 benefits of communication partner instruction, summarize 3 benefits of partner augmented input, and describe at least 3 elements of successful communication partner instruction programs.
And here are some ways to keep in touch with us.
And this will be at the end of the slide too, so you guys can see this at the end of the presentation today.
Also,
so let's get in.
Go ahead.
Yes, also including the handout. And so let's go ahead and get started today. So Sarah Douglas wrote that communication partner involves 2 or more persons, as well as the AAC user, as well as the communication partner. And they both need to adapt to the skills and needs of each other for a successful interaction.
Yeah, and Kent Walsh and McNaughton have suggested that the success of a communication interaction between an AAC communicator and their communication partner depend heavily on the skills of the partner. So those of you out there who are parents of children who use AAC, those of you who are speech pathologists, teachers, you know that your children, clients, students may communicate differently with different communication partners depending on their level of skill, right? How much pause time they give, whether they recognize some nonverbal forms of communication. So partners are really important pieces of this communication puzzle.
And there is a growing body of research out there that states that, you know what, training your AAC significant communication partners, the parents, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the related staff, you know, siblings, friends, whoever it may be, can be of great benefit in promoting greater participation in daily interactions by people who use AAC systems. We know there's positive outcomes for our AAC users as well as our partners that we're training.
And we're going to talk all about those outcomes in just a moment. But some researchers, including us, have considered partner instruction as an intervention for those with complex communication needs, right? We know that when we train partners, we see outcomes in our children, students, clients. And so because it's a really powerful intervention, it should routinely be provided as part of our AAC assessment. As soon as a family gets a piece of technology, as soon as a school team gets a piece of technology in the classroom, we need to be thinking about providing this staff instruction right away.
Now let's think about all those hours that a kid spends at school, right? It's roughly 30 plus hours a week that that child is sitting in the classroom. So if we think about that, all those different school professionals in there, the therapists, the paraprofessionals, teachers are very key in terms of being a communication partner in that environment.
So what we know about untrained communication partners in school is that no matter who it is, whether it's an instructor in a school, whether it's another peer who is in special education or in general education, that everybody tends to dominate, partner dominated interactions are seen. So what that means is that children who use AAC serve as respondents in as high as 91% of communicative opportunities, right? That's a lot. So as I'd said before, right, these asymmetries in initiation have been reported with instructors, speaking peers with disabilities at school. They occur in inclusive classrooms. And the other thing that we know is that even in inclusive classrooms, our kids who are AAC communicators tend to interact primarily with adults, with their teacher, with their instructional assistant, in greater than 90% of communicative opportunities rather than with their peers.
And when we look at school staff, right, there's 30 plus hours we said that our school staff interact with students who use AAC. But just some of those key partners, the speech paths, the special education teachers may graduate from pre-service training with minimal to no exposure to AAC. Right. I know in terms of the speech and language programs out there, AAC is not mandatory. They do not have to take a class specifically on it. Usually it's rolled into other classes. We have a lot of interns that would come to our cooperative, and there have been a few that said, no, we didn't have a class. It was rolled into motor speech disorders or whatever it might be. And most special education teachers do not and did not receive formal training in AAC during their teacher licensure preparation programs, resulting in low levels of self-reported knowledge and skills. My wife is a special education teacher. She teaches K through second grade. And guess what? She had no training in school on AAC. And guess what? She has usually 3 to 4 to 5 kids that are using some form of AAC, right? And we look at approximately 55% of school SLPs, regular students using AAC. That's a high percentage. And a recent study conducted of SLPs across the US found that 74% of the respondents felt that they lack adequate preparation in AAC and AT. Because of that, classroom staff are likely to require professional development opportunities to really further their knowledge and skills in AAC so we can help them being able to be successful in those interactions with their students that use AAC.
So for teachers, the most common form of training is a one-day in-service. Let's hear from some of you out there. Anybody here working in the schools? Anybody here providing trainings in the schools? What are you guys seeing as far as your most common forms of training, right? These are, this is a lot of what we see. Okay, lots of school SLPs here. We've got some yeses in the Slack chat. So what we know is that the professional development literature overwhelmingly shows that this model leads to little change in teaching practice. And
right, those traditional training strategies, that we all have in the schools, right? My guess, if you're sitting in there, I see some people are posting in there, is that they're usually the institute day, right? Whether it's the beginning of the school year, maybe the couple that we have scattered throughout the year, or their early releases that we have once a month, after school training, sometimes before school trainings. But those in-services are frequently insufficient in helping our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our related staff really develop the expertise they need to actually support our students that use AAC.
Got it. And I see some comments here that they did, some people have even done like a 3-day in-service, and we're going to get to, and teachers are still not following through and implementing. And so let's talk about why that might be and what we can do slightly differently to really help people be able to implement this in the natural environment. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about implementation fidelity. Implementation fidelity is simply the degree to which an intervention is delivered as intended. But implementation fidelity is critical to successful translation of evidence-based interventions into practice. So if you're learning about a specific strategy, really important to understand that you have to implement it exactly as it's designed. In other words, with fidelity, in order to be able to use that evidence-based classroom, evidence-based practice in the classroom. So implementation features, in other words, the practices used to train our partners are as important as the intervention features to establish evidence-based practice. So let's break that down, right? In other words, that means what we teach is as important as how we teach.
And I do see people in the Slack stating different ways they provide trainings, and some that because of the lack of substitute teachers, it's hard to do the in-service component. People have a lot of different ways that they've been getting some of the in-services in place, which is great. As we kind of talk about today, Mortimer Adler talks about this. All genuine learning is active, not passive. So when we as PD instructors, if we're doing these in-services, act as these information transmitters and see our participants as passive receptacles, we know that these teachers, these participants, these paraprofessionals are going to have limited recall of information, sometimes weeks, months, and years later. And really, it's inability to help them generalize and integrate the information into their actual classroom on a regular basis.
Yeah, so if you look at the little diagram, you see I am not an artiste. What you'll see is that when we often do a traditional type of professional development, the assumption is that you all out here in the sphere, in the web worlds, are empty heads, and we're just filling your heads with words: respect and reflect, repeat, expand, stop, all of the good s'mores things. However, what we know is that you all come with your own backgrounds, right? Some of you work in schools, some of you are parents, some of you are trainers who are training others. And so we can't presume that you don't already have this knowledge and experience. So what we really need to do is to look at this in a more active versus passive sort of way when we're looking at school staff instruction.
Right. And when we're really instructing these communication partners, we got to think about a lot of these partners in the school come from different backgrounds. And if it's our paraprofessionals or different related staff, they don't have a lot of training in what we're talking about. But we need to use a combination of training practices to really generate that best results, right? We need to bring in the in-service component so we can describe things, show some video demonstration, maybe do a little practice. But we also got to make sure we do demonstration within the classroom, making sure that we provide some feedback and get into some coaching. Because Darling Hammond talk about this, teaching is not talking and learning is not listening. So we can't just sit there and do the in-service and talk about the things that we expect. We actually have to look at bringing that active component into it.
So when we talk about classroom, making things meaningful, this is something that we know that most skills needed by successful practitioners can be introduced in your training or in your workshop, but they're really learned on the job with the help of a consultant or a coach, right? This is the special sauce. We know that all of the other ingredients are really important in a training, but this is the special sauce.
I love the special sauce. And so we're really talking about, we know coaching improves the fidelity of evidence-based practices. And for these teachers, the other related staff, the speech path, the paraprofessional, to actually successfully implement this new practice, at some point, the focus of training must account for the challenges encountered when teaching real students in real classrooms, right? So we can't just always be outside. I saw someone in the Slack talk about pushing. Yes, right? We have to be in the situation, whether the barriers of a classroom, some of the challenges that do occur with other students walking around and different things, we need to be in the classroom. And one way of improving the fidelity of providing teachers with individualized follow-up support after initial training, right? And one particular effective form of follow-up is, guess what? Coaching, right? That special sauce. And coaching involves that expert, university faculty, a supervisor, a lead teacher, a skilled peer, providing that individualized support to teachers after the initial training occurs. And like we said, we do have to provide the in-service. We need that piece, but we also got to make sure that we're doing that coaching, in the real classroom with real students.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about what coaching is in just a quick sec. But before we do, Matt's going to show us an amazing statistic here and point out some of the things for you here. So Joyce and Showers in 2002 looked at these different training components and how they work individually and then in combination. So if we just start with theory and discussion, which is the very first piece on your upper left, Matt, if you could point that out for us. Theory and discussion, we see a 10% increase in staff knowledge. 5% generalizes to skill demonstration, but check that out. Use in the classroom, goose egg, 0. Even when you see there's a little plus there, that means even when we add to theory and discussion, demonstration and training, we bump knowledge to 30%, skill demonstration to 20%, but use in the classroom, still 0. So if we add to both of those, practice and feedback in the training, so doing some controlled practice during our training, we see nice gains in knowledge and skill demonstration, but now we still only have 5% use in the classroom. So if we take a look at this last piece, when to all of the above, we add coaching in the classroom, that's where we get 95% use in the classroom. So I really want us to think about that. Our training is not just what happens in a little room outside of the classroom. It's what actually happens in the naturally occurring activity, right? In real classrooms with real students, right? That's what Matt's previous slide was about. So when we talk about coaching, I think there's lots of information out there on coaching, and it's all a little bit different. When we're talking about coaching, we're talking about side-by-side, otherwise known as in vivo coaching. So what is this side-by-side coaching? Well, it allows teachers to receive in vivo or live feedback specific to the accuracy of their implementation of new teaching behaviors, right? So whatever we want them to be doing AAC-wise, in our case, we talk a lot about partner augmented input, right? Modeling on AAC devices. they are getting live feedback in the moment. In addition, side-by-side coaching allows teachers opportunities to observe us or whoever their coach is using the specific procedures, right? The modeling is being demonstrated by an expert, right? That's the coach with their own students in the context of a real lesson. We're just going to keep bringing it back to that. And during side-by-side coaching, the coach directly intervenes during the lesson, provides a model and a rationale for opportunity for the change, and then provides additional opportunities for the teacher to teach the same format again with the immediate feedback from the coach. So if you look at our graphic here, right, when we're talking about coaching, the child participates. It occurs during naturally occurring routines and activities. It occurs in the natural environment. So that can be the home. In our case, in our presentation today, we're talking about getting in that classroom. And the coach observes the interaction and provides immediate feedback. Some of the other coaching that you may be familiar with out there is really something that we think of more as collaboration. This is when the adults communicate while the child does something else. It can occur outside of the classroom or therapy session. It can be an email, phone call, or face-to-face meeting. But there is a lot of overlap, right? In the middle, we have there in white. Both of these are a relationship between equals. Both partners express their points of view and choices are made collaboratively.
But what we know is that most of our professional development activities occur outside of that classroom, right? We're not always using the best practices that we know in the literature for professional development. Thus, that opportunity for that teacher to immediately use what they're learning is limited, right? They don't have that scaffold support so that they can learn it. And Tharp and Gallimore called this lack of activity the choke point of change. Basically, they're struggling to transfer and use what they're learning and actually applying all the skills we're trying to get to. And that's what we always get into the coaching piece, because it's not similar to their day-to-day opportunities. So getting into the coaching component and seeing some of the things in Slack, right? And how can we go about doing this? But what we do know is when we use this job-embedded professional development, it refers to that school staff education that's grounded in the day-to-day classroom activities, right? We're not doing things always outside. Yes, we do some of it outside. But the idea of it is it's to really enhance that teacher's context-specific instructional practice with the intent of improving student learning. What did we talk about before? When we actually do see that communication partner instruction is the intervention, also, we see positive outcomes for our students who use AACs, right? So we know if we spend that time and those resources of why we bring it back to our administration, that we're going to train within the classroom. And some people will talk about sucking all our time out, right? That's why, because we also have the positive outcome for them. You know, remember what Jill talked about before, that special sauce. So it's primarily a school classroom. Really the format we should be providing is that coaching.
Yeah, and I did want to say too that, you know, a lot of this is going to overlap, those of you who are working in the schools, with your therapy. You know, your therapy might end up being a little bit more push in than pull out, and, you know, include some coaching. Again, coaching is an intervention. So hopefully it's occurring within the hours that you have already for your students. So
so you want me to keep rolling on this one?
No, go ahead.
So again, just as we know, like, remember, the closer that the activity is the actual of what the classroom teacher does on a regular basis with their current students, the more job embedded it is, the more reality that we're going to actually see them use it outside of here. And we'll get into some of the pieces. If you have questions about how to kind of do it, you'll see some of it as we go forward.
So the research tells us that there are benefits to communication partner instruction. These are just a couple of studies, not including ours, that have showed that there are benefits. So Binger et al. 2010 have shown that students improve multi-symbol messages. Senner and Mason in 2015 found that the child increased their total communication turns. So remember, we were talking in the very beginning that their communicative turns can be lower because conversations are partner dominated and that they're respondents. We can see an increase in these turns by training communication partners. So, yeah, next slide.
So Kaiser and Wright suggest that to adequately support our kids who are using AAC, the adults in that classroom, at home, or whoever are training have to have specific skills in 3 different areas: the communication mode, strategies for responding to that child's communication, that student's communication, and also strategies for modeling.
Yeah, and so our focus really is on those strategies for modeling, but through that, we actually get to strategies for responding to children's communication and also better understanding of the communication mode, which ties really well into a comment that's just popped in the Slack. This device is too complicated. You can't use it, which might mean I don't have my reading glasses, so I can't model. Right, that that teachers and students will learn their devices better when we're all modeling the communication device. And so through modeling and through some of the other steps, including coaching, teachers will become more comfortable with it. You'll actually see we have some quotes from some of the teachers who participated in our research just a little later on.
Right. And so how do we actually provide partner augmented input? Well, this is where the parents, the teachers, the peers, the siblings, the paraprofessionals, whoever it is, point to one or more of the key words from their spoken message on that child's communication system immediately before, during, or after saying that message. So as we, and the thing to really highlight here is like we're talking and pointing at the same time. Again, think about that. What is partner augmented in? It's at least 2 different modalities. That's what's in our definition. So we want to do both.
So there are lots of research studies that have been published on partner augmented input. Just to hit some of the highlights, I think this is probably a crowd I don't have to convince you as to the benefits here, but it increases vocabulary comprehension. So not just symbol comprehension, but also the comprehension of the vocabulary itself, the referent itself. So basic concepts, if we're trying to say big, small, etc. So it increases symbol comprehension in production. So simply by modeling, not only does it help children understand the symbols, but also it helps them start using the symbols. Simply by modeling, we can actually see an increase in kids using the symbols. It increases the production of multi-symbol messages. So putting messages together to create a sentence, increases the use of morphemes such as past tense ed or plural s. So walked, cookies. I'm hoping that admin can hop in. Someone's saying the presentation contents appear to be blurry. So
Katie said it looks fine. So
okay. So
might be
maybe it's an issue on your end.
Yep.
But overall, we have some meta-analyses, which really are kind of that gold standard in research, right? They take years and years of research and condense it into a single paper. That PAI is associated with pragmatic semantic gains in pragmatic semantic syntax and morphology. So again, social skills, word knowledge, making sentences, and also those word endings, and is effective in individuals of varying ages, disabilities, and language skills. So a recent review suggests that PAI meets the criteria to be considered evidence-based. And we know how important evidence-based practices are in our medical profession and also in our schools. So when we're looking at whether something is evidence-based, remember, we're not only talking about what we're teaching, but we're also talking about how we're teaching. So we're going to get into the how in just a quick sec.
Right. And so Kent Walsh McNaughton back in 2005, so about 17 years ago, proposed an 8-step instructional model for training communication partner for people who use AAC. And they really wanted to look at those instructional methods that have been tied to evidence-based procedures. Thinking outside, knowing that just doing the in-services aren't enough, they knew we had to add different training elements, right? So then in those 8 steps, they really stressed that component where let's look at adding different training elements. Let's talk about demonstration. Let's talk about verbal practice. Let's talk about, practice and feedback and coaching. They brought that all into it. And really when we talk about using that, that's where we see the success of the training program for our staff and parents.
So those of you who geek out over reading the research like I do, have probably heard of these 8 steps already, because numerous communication partner education models in AAC have derived their work from this seminal article, including the Impact Program, Modeler, and also the S'mores training program. So although all 8 instructional steps, pre-test, commitment, strategy description, strategy demonstration, all the way through, are present in each program, the thing that differs is the strategies that are being taught to school staff. So for example, the Impact Program really focuses on facilitating communication by asking questions during storybook reading.
Right, and the S'mores training program is based on that aforementioned 8-step instructional model. However, it's specifically designed to be used within those natural occurring activities in the classroom at home. So we're not just going ahead and focusing on one activity. We're not changing the routine of the classroom, right? And that's the big piece. When some of the comments in the Slack there really talk about, the more that is the routine of their day-to-day routine, the more likely they're going to be able to carry it out. And the other thing about the S'mores training program is that it focuses on promoting the use of that modeling, that partner augmented input on that child's current device. Some of the research studies and some of the other programs were actually using some, activity-based based displays for their research study.
So remember that job-embedded professional development needs to occur in day-to-day classroom activities, right? So we've already talked about that. So, when Matt and I started this research, what our big frustration was that we'd go in, same things that we're reading in the Slack chat here. We'd go into a classroom and, we'd do this awesome in-service, and then we'd come back and we'd observe a month later and no one's using the strategy. And so we started researching evidence-based methodologies for staff training. And so that's how we kind of developed the S'mores program. Our first research project was using it in the schools. Our second research project was using it with families. And now our actual current research is actually doing it via telehealth. But really what our goal now to do with the S'mores program is to bridge this gap between research and practice. So we know that in many disciplines, there is a gap between what is known as an effective practice. So in other words, our theory and science and what is actually done, policy and practice, right? Ken Walsh and McNaughton came out with their study in 2005. So we're pushing 20 years, right? It's 18 years since that study was published, yet we're still seeing a lot of these one-day in-service type trainings. And in fact, the lag time between research and practice averages about 17 years. Sometimes it's even more. The range is pretty wide. I mean, sometimes it's 25 years, sometimes it's longer. So despite the fact that we know that multiple training elements are required for optimal student outcomes, including coaching, this is still not widely done in schools.
right? So think about like some of you guys are doing, as Jill mentioned, how can we start bridging that gap? Well, I know a lot of you guys that are here might recognize the mnemonic of s'mores. I see some familiar names in the Slack. If we look at s'mores, right, we break it down for different facilitation techniques for language, like slow rate and modeling with self-talk, parallel talk, repetition, respect and reflect, attending and stopping in different ways. But that's just one part. That's the verbal practice. That's one step in a much larger program for communication training. Because we know just talking about s'mores and bringing in there, you're not going to see a team, a paraprofessional teacher implement it. They're going to think it's too difficult. It's just one part of it.
In 2017, we published the school staff article. This, unfortunately, is not an open source article, but again, if you geek out over reading research like I do, please do feel free to email us. Our emails will be at the end of the presentation, and we'll gladly send you a reprint. But what we found when we use the s'mores instructional model to train a classroom teacher, a speech language pathologist, and 2 instructional assistants was that all staff increased modeling on the student's speech generating device, measured across activities. And we saw that the student increased his frequency of communication measured by utterances per minute, and also his independence or initiation, right? He was less of a respondent and more of an initiator. And we're seeing some comments in the Slack. I found that a hybrid approach, telepractice and in-person coaching is so good. I have to say it with the extra O's. Interested in the research about telepractice? Yes, well, be on the lookout because we're going to be recruiting subjects very soon. We hope to be implementing some of this in the fall and hope to have some information for you shortly thereafter.
Right. We also look at social validity, and I love these because guess what? I still hear this all the time after I do the coaching in the classroom, right? And they noted the changes in themselves. They were more familiar and quicker with the device, just like some of our posts, and they were saying that they weren't so familiar, right? We found that with the 8 steps and kind of do it through with them, they've become more familiar. They explain more to the child. They slowed their speech rate. They used the device more. They paused more. They were more relaxed in therapy. I love this one. Actually communicating with my students, right? Instead of doing the drill and kill, they were actually talking with the students, whether they're using self-talk and parallel talk. They're better meeting their needs. They were more knowledgeable again of the device. And that's what we keep hearing. The changes that they note themselves are usually a lot about that. More familiar, they're pausing more, they're becoming more knowledgeable about the device and how to use it in the classroom.
And can I just point out a couple of things here? So the reason why we came up with the s'mores mnemonic was to help people remember those ingredients to successful modeling. Again, just one step in this larger training program. But each part of that s'mores mnemonic operationally defines partner augmented input. So when we see they slowed their speech rate, that's the last S in s'mores, right? That's stop. Or S was the first S was slowed speech rate is the first S, slow rate. The I paused more is the last S, the stop. So we can actually see, and they're seeing in themselves that they're actually using those specific strategies more in the classroom.
And that's what you'll find. Like the s'mores gives that common language. It's a good way for the coach to kind of see. There's so much that goes into that makes it successful and easy for you guys to implement.
So some other things that we noted or that the staff noted were changes in the students. And again, these are just fabulous. He would imitate us. He used the device a little differently, not just when requested. And I'm going to insert in here, not just when prompted. He stayed with the group longer. He was more engaged. He appeared more relaxed, that I was communicating with him in a way that made sense to him. So stop and think about this. There have been other studies that have shown that when we do this type of using an AAC in a child-directed activity, that we get increased engagement. This is what the staff are talking about. We didn't measure it in our study. We weren't looking for it, but they're describing it here. He paid attention more. There was differentiation in his speech.
Right. And then even the staffs noted the things that they liked about the training. They were using a device, they become more familiar. The skills learned were useful throughout the day. Yes, right. So we weren't just talking to them in that before school, after school, or institute day and help that they would actually just start doing it. They were doing it throughout the day because we were using it throughout the day with them. The one that I really love here, feedback during the lesson, showing me the things on the device, right? Feedback. Think about that. We know, and I saw some of the comments in Slack that people kind of stress out about the idea that someone's going to be watching them and coaching them, and they kind of freak out. But guess what? Every single time, that's exactly the thing that most of our staff like the best. They like that immediate feedback. They like us going in and demonstrating live within the activity that they do every day with this student. Again, specific feedback, quick feedback. We keep seeing that. And they just, again, keep talking about this, gain more knowledge of the device and where things were. So yeah, they're becoming more familiar. Think about the Kaiser and Wright. You got to become familiar with the mode as well as strategies for modeling and responding. And you see that within all these likes.
So Erna Allant did a review of the study. And the thing that I really want to highlight about this quote is just that the natural classroom environment and the minimal disruption to the daily routines of staff. This is so important. A lot of other programs expect families or kids to do something that may not be part of their normal routine. So for example, engage in a storybook reading routine. And so we were hearing from families that they don't have time for homework. They need to be able to do this when they're getting ready for bed, when they're brushing teeth, when they're reading, maybe they're reading a bedtime story, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're just tucking in, maybe they're saying prayers. Sometimes the only time families have together is that bedtime time or around the dinner table. And so they need to be able to push it into regularly occurring routines. And our teachers say the same, right? You know, there are so many things that teachers are responsible for accomplishing during a school day. And then we say, oh, and now you need to do this. We need to make this happen in the regular routine.
So another study I looked at, it talked about that the findings suggest that the 8-step instructional model resulted in effective implementation of AAC amongst staff, right? That the participants in the study utilized a variety of AAC hardware and software, suggesting the benefits of the model will extend to a range of AAC systems, right? It's just not about bringing an activity-based board that's specific to that classroom or that activity. It's about using the system in there and using different devices, and they were able to effectively, implement them.
Yeah, as Caroline Musselwhite says, you can dance with the girl you brought. You don't have to use a single communication system for the entire classroom for this to work. In my very first pilot classroom, sometimes we're asked, like maybe they don't want to roll it out school-wide, can you do it in a pilot classroom? They're the largest private therapeutic autism school in the state of Illinois wanted to do a pilot classroom of s'mores. And so we ran a pilot class and there were 7 different kids and 7 different devices. So someone had Unity 84 sequence, someone had word power, someone had cough drop, right? We had all different communication systems, yet staff were able to implement for this program because of the way that it's taught and because it's used within the naturally occurring environment, because it's job embedded.
All right, so what we have here is we're going to watch a video, a pre-test from a classroom. And what we want you to do is always be nice about it. We want to see some of the things that you notice when watching this video about the communication partner and as well as the user.
Holiday Inn, ask a friend. Just I think I'll buy you the phone.
How about you? What do you
Justin,
think?
when you drink for Thanksgiving?
Me?
Justin.
Oh. Right here. Sarah. Where's home, Justin? Sit down. All right.
Listen, finish this and then it will be finished,
Here.
all right? I what?
You need to answer. Come on.
Places.
Oh my goodness. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. She needs to take her hands off him and model without expectation. Right. Okay. So she's physically prompting. So she's doing hand over hand prompting. Okay. So that's one thing. More physically touching, questioning versus commenting, hand over hand. Aha. Demanding a response. Remember we talked about that? Communication was work, not interacting. All of this. Forcing communication.
Testing.
Testing
With the
Oh my
device,
gosh.
fine.
Ugh, right? So
And like
I mean,
Summer, I see the positive side too, right? I mean, she moved it closer to him, so that's something, yes, right? Whether it's for her or him.
Yeah, quizzing him, saying, where is home on the device? I wonder if the student even knows what that means. It was out of reach at first. Yeah, I mean, so many different things that that staff might not even think about. And so I want to point out for those of you, we're not trying to be overly critical here. We're trying to point out what happens in most classrooms with untrained staff at baseline. And by the way, it's not just classrooms. We see a disproportionate amount of that prompting and demanding and dominating the conversation in families as well. So
and so you guys know too, the pretest, the video, it's not just for us as coaches, right? The pretest video is more for the communication partners themselves to kind of see what's going on, right? Because after we do the baseline, before we ever get into the in-service component of it, where you're actually talking about what s'mores is and how to kind of do different pieces. And after they do that, they go back and look at their video, and it's really eye-opening because they see the things that they can maybe adjust, change, things that they like. So it's really powerful a way. So the power of video, it's not about us always just giving feedback. It's about that collaboration component that Jill was talking about with giving.
Absolutely. This is step one in the s'mores training program. It's pretest. And what is pretest? It's not a paper test that you take, like a multiple choice paper test. It is seeing what's currently occurring. And we do have staff watch these, and we have family watch these so that we can discuss and we can plan. And Summer, you mentioned the context for giving to staff feedback when you're pushing in. And, the ins and outs of coaching is outside of today's presentation. I mean, I know Jim Knight came to Matt's school and he spent 3 days just talking about instructional coaching. So, but what I will say is that it does need to be collaborative. It's often kind of like Jeopardy. We provide the answer in the form of a question. So what do you think about pausing more? Those sorts of things so that they are more collaborative. So let's watch the post test, same thing. See how she looks after the training.
Holiday.
Oops, sorry, there it is. All righty, here it comes.
Or if you want, we can go. We can go back and you can say frogs. You said that earlier. I think you like frogs. I think you like.
Okay, so I know we're keeping it short because sometimes streaming can be a little choppy, and but we want to give you a flavor of what that looks like. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in the post test?
The students watching her model the AAC, especially without the expectation for him to use it. Yes, right? She's just commenting what's going on in the classroom.
He smiled at her.
He smiled at her.
He's so engaged, right? He's engaged. So what they're doing at this snack time is kind of a really cool activity. Rather than talking about the food, which no one ever really talks about at the food, they have a conversation. So they're trying to work on these conversational skills. So she's modeling with decrease of expectations. Yeah, she's interpreting for him. So a child across the table said that his favorite animal was frog or whatever they're talking about. And she's interpreting that for him. And because of that, he's engaged. He's following what's happening across the room. Yes, both partners are engaged and involved in the exchange.
And like we said, think about the data too that we found, like we do a lot. It's like we see an increase in independence, right? We see a lot of those things because again, it's not forcing it. It's not the hand over hand or the gestural cues that we know a lot of untrained partners will do.
Yeah. And Erin, I said, you love the Jeopardy analogy. It's a great reminder when guiding coaches thinking, right? That we can't come in like gangbusters, like do this, don't do that. Because people are going to start tuning us out really quickly. Remembering each of us has a voice in this process. So, yeah, Katie, I see you said you work with a family who does this. And so, you have to kind of slowly change perspectives without actually telling people that they're wrong, right? It's a tricky dance.
And Lori just said, I feel like once a device is plopped in front of the front of a student or a communication partner, forget, what a normal conversation skill is, right? And that's why it's so important about getting into the actual environment to use the typical day-to-day and routines with the staff that you're working with. And, there's a lot of tricks that we do with block scheduling that helps kind of build capacity in classrooms. But, what we do know is like you could read the research, you can look at some of the articles that we have out there. And it's really hard to implement it in terms of true fidelity, right? It's like we said before, it's beyond s'mores. And that's why we provide this whole toolkit of our trainings that comes with the manual so that you have all the forms out there. You have slideshows so that you guys, as the PD people, have those components built into it. So you're not recreating a wheel. There's a DVD that actually goes through the whole in-service component of the training, as well as all the forms, like we said, so it helps you kind of build the coaching component. So, there's a link up there for you guys to look into. If you want more information, just let us know.
Yeah, well, also, Matt, you want to pop that in the Slack chat, that link?
Yep.
And just really quickly, I think that we all know that we all have busy schedules, right? There's a new staff that pops into the, mix in the middle of the school year after you've done your training. And so one of the things that we want to make available is ways to do that self-paced learning, to do that asynchronous learning, which is why we also have the DVD. And Katie, I see to parents doing s'mores look like they aren't doing anything, especially if the kid isn't giving any signs that they are paying attention to the modeling. They don't realize how important the natural context is. It looks natural. It looks like they're just having a conversation. Katie, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly.
Right. And that's why the power of video too, so they can actually see it, identify and go, wow, look at what's going on here.
Yeah. I mean, and I think what you saw in the video, in the post-test video of the school staff is just that, she's engaging with the student, and, it's no longer a test. There's this natural back and forth, whether he uses the device or not.
Yeah. So, we always try to bring in some of the same stuff that we preach and push and talk about coaching, and reflection is always a big part of it. So just think for today, hearing, some bits and pieces and watching a few videos and getting kind of some information about what it is, like, after hearing today, what are some of the things that you're going to stop doing? And I don't even focus on that. I look at what are things that, because you guys are doing a lot of good things, what are things that you're going to refine that you've already started using in your classroom and your districts and your schools? Because it looks like a lot of people bring in a lot of PD. So what are things you might start refining? And what are some things that you're going to start doing? You can put that in the Slack too.
So if we didn't get to your questions today, I know we're bumping into the next session here. Feel free to email us your questions if you were struggling. I will tell you sometimes the email turnaround for getting the password to the website is up as long as 20 minutes. So if it didn't come immediately and you didn't get it in 20 minutes, check your junk box. And if you still didn't get it, please feel free to email us. We're happy to email you our handouts. And again, you can also keep in touch with us. Matt, you want to pop up some of our socials here in many other ways.
There you go. Just put them in there. Any questions going forward? Anyone have any else?
You're most welcome. I see some of you guys are saying thank you. Glad you're finding this information helpful. Would love to hear your what you're going to start doing, what you're going to refine, and what you're going to stop doing. We can keep monitoring the Slack after we have to hop off of the Zoom and let the next presenters go.
Anyone want to share something?
Joyful, genuine interactions with kids, like as a baseline. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think one of the things that we have to understand is that our pretests, our baselines are what are normal, completely expected strategies that people adopt to deal with children who can't communicate well. It happens whether you're a peer, it happens whether you're a staff member, it happens whether you are a parent. So just keep in mind that these baselines are simply a starting point for people who haven't learned how to use a device in a more natural way. Okay, so
Thank you.
Kayla said, I'm going to stop assuming that all staff have had trainings with modeling AAC in the schools setting and provide as much modeling for both students and staff. Yes, we'll keep giving you high fives for that one.
Yes. Lori says change can be scary. She's quoting, but you know what's scarier? Allowing fear to stop you from growing, evolving, and progressing. Andy Hale.
Love it. Love it. Well, thanks, guys. Hey, I know Melissa needs to hop on and wrap us up for today. But thanks so much for attending. It was great having this very rich conversation with you guys, and can't wait to hear how this goes in your classrooms.
Jill and Matt, thank you so much. What a great presentation with some really applicable pieces that anybody can kind of pick out and be able to use in their everyday opportunities to communicate with anybody, whoever you're interacting with. These are things that could be a really big benefit. So thank you for sharing your insight and your research and experience. We appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for attending this session, and we hope we'll see you in the next session.